When was the last time in your life where you felt free, happy, and at peace? The answer to this question may differ for people, but there are many people who think about their childhood when they answer this question. The last time they truly felt free and at peace was so far back that it almost feels like a dream. It's just a distant memory of what life was like back then when you were young. It feels almost unreal to think about this time. But yet there is this sense of freedom and joy there. And for most people, the idea is really strong that this kind of innocence and freedom is lost forever. That now that they have grown up, this experience of joyfulness and happiness is just not possible for them anymore. And of course, to some extent, if you believe this, it's quite understandable. You won't go back to being this happy child again. That's just utterly impossible. But you might ask yourself, well, what has changed about my mind? Why, when I was young, could I truly be free and happy? And why does that seem to be so difficult now? Well, we can come up with different reasons. And many people have the sense that they grew up and had to take on so many responsibilities and so many burdens that losing the freedom they had previously is just a natural consequence of that. They feel that they have been burdened so deeply by their life circumstances that the happiness they felt back then is just inaccessible now. And very often, what comes with that are not just the direct circumstantial burdens we have in life, but also the burden of the past, which we carry into the present moment. We think about all the bad things that happened to us, and we still feel the impact of them to some degree. And that too seems to be why we don't have access to this freedom anymore. But in my view, there's a much deeper reason for why this happiness we felt when we were young seems so inaccessible now. And the reason for this is simply yourself. The self you take yourself to be is the reason why this freedom and joy seems so hard to get now. And of course, it's true that the responsibilities you have and the traumatic events you might have gone through can seem to be a hindrance to our peace. But there's something much more fundamental at work here as well. And that is our self-identity. It's the question about what we really are. Because you see, when we were young, we didn't have so many ideas about what we were. Of course, we had some ideas. As soon as we began to talk, we had the sense of who our parents are, who our friends are, who we are, what we look like. But all of these ideas, this entire self-construct, was held very loosely. It wasn't solidified yet. We didn't walk around with this heavy burden of being a separately existing entity. The self-construct we had was very light. It didn't have this heaviness to it yet. And I'm not saying that we can truly get back to this childlike self-construct, nor am I saying that would be desirable. Of course it's not. Of course, we could say that in order to function in this relative world, as an adult, as a grown-up, you had to formulate this more complicated self-construct. But the good thing is that the self-construct in of itself is not the problem we need to solve. It's always just a matter of how we relate to this self-construct. When we were children, this self-construct felt so simple and light that it was relatively easy not to identify with it too much. But for most adults, that's much different. The temptation to hold this self-construct with a tightness, a fixation, and a seriousness is very, very strong. Most people hold on to this sense of self to such an extent that it seems to be a tremendous hindrance to their whole experience, to their engagement with life. It seems like there's always this filter of self here, through which every experience is rendered. We feel that we are somehow isolated. We are living with a kind of shield up. And because we are doing that, the peace which is inherent to us seems to be lost. So, what can we do? If we can't get rid of this more complex self-construct, does that mean we are doomed to suffering from the heaviness of the self? Well, luckily, that's not the case. Because you see, the self-construct, even when you were a child, wasn't really fundamentally true. It didn't really define what you were. If at any given moment in your life, you actually turned back and asked yourself, what am I? You would always arrive at an answer that lies fundamentally outside of your self-construct. You might have all these ideas about what you look like, your age, your profession, your relationships, and they all seem to form a kind of identity. But what is the one who is wearing these identities? What is your essential being, in other words? This is always something we can ask ourselves. And the answer to that has never fundamentally changed. Now, I could give different labels to what our essential being is, and it turns out it's the same for all of us. But the label doesn't really matter. One word I like to use here is simply awareness. What you really are is just awareness. And what is awareness? Well, it's exactly that which is having this experience right now. And do you see how you are intimately familiar with this awareness? This awareness is your most fundamental being. It doesn't matter who you ask. All people would say, I am aware of my experience. But what is this I? What is this I that is aware of experience? If you just open up, relax, and settle into this I that is experiencing, you will find that it is just awareness. It is not a self. It is not a construct. It doesn't have a location or a limit to it. It's undoubtedly present and real. It's awake. It is aware. But it doesn't have any objective qualities to it. And it therefore also doesn't have any limiting qualities to it. It doesn't age through time. It was the same awareness when you were a child as it is now, no matter how old you are. There are no blemishes on it, no scars, no wounds. It has always been in the same condition. And you can always realize that. And so what happens when you return to your fundamental being? When you recognize what you are, what you have been all along? Well, all of a sudden, this suffocating self-construct doesn't feel so heavy anymore. We have a very different relationship to this personal self, this person we believe to be. We can now experience it with a kind of lightness. We're not so serious about it anymore. And that's a fundamentally different experience. So it turns out that growing up and becoming an adult was not a hindrance to this fundamental peace and freedom we used to experience when we were younger. It's still here. It's still just as accessible. All you need to do is find out what you really are. And immediately you arrive at this peace of your being, this openness, this freedom, this innocence, which has never changed. It is closer than close to you. You know it intimately because you are it. So stop overlooking what you are. Again, open up to your field of experience. Relax back into your being and see that you have never lost anything. You have always been this wholeness. If anything about this remains unclear, you can always get in touch with me through my website. Other than that, don't forget to subscribe if you want to stay up to date with my latest videos. And I will see you right here next time. Thanks for watching.